get started, this is a concept that we looked at more so in quarter 2. And I want to come back to it because we're getting to the end of the year. We have the post-ACT coming up, so I want to make sure that we are coming back to this so that we keep it in our minds. We're looking at parenthetical elements. Now, I do want to clarify that we refer to these in 2 different ways. Sometimes we call them appositives, and so I'm going to explain what that is. But just as a definition refresher, a parenthetical element is a word or group of words that interrupts the flow of a sentence and adds additional but non-essential information to that sentence. That's really important. It adds additional information, but it's not essential. So it doesn't mean that what's there is wrong or bad, but if you took it out of the sentence would still make sense and still be complete. The sentence or the element can be long or short, and it can appear at the beginning, the middle, or the end of a clause or sentence. And we're going to go over that in a second. So like I said, we often call these appositives. Why do we name them different? Because appositives typically use commas, but what you're going to find is that next year in 10th grade and 11th grade, you'll be exploring different kinds of parenthetical elements, and that also includes using dashes instead of commas. That's literally it. That's why I'm calling it this, but we're going to start referring to them as parenthetical elements. So I want to do a really quick examples here for you. How do they work? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the sentence and I'm going to ask myself, what is the information that is adding something new to it, that is either a definition, a clarification, a description, that is non-essential. It's kind of extra information. So I'm going to do this part so you can hear what my thinking looks like. This first one says, the book, a 758-page monster, was required for my history class. So when I read that, I see that there's a description of what the book is. So I'm going to underline this because this is describing the book. But it seems like it's a separate part of the sentence. So I'm going to put a comma before and after. So that's how I identify my appositive, and that's how I make sure I have a comma on both sides. In this case, the appositive is in the middle of the sentence. That's what we kind of focused on in quarter 2. We kind of looked at appositives in the middle, but they also can appear at the end of a sentence. So this one says, we decided to have lunch at Mastro's, a steakhouse. So what's being defined here is I'm seeing the name Mastro's there, and I'm seeing that a steakhouse is describing what Mastro's is. So I need to set it apart with a comma. Now you'll notice that the other end, I'm obviously not going to put a comma because it's at the end of the sentence, but it's still separate from the rest of the sentence. It's set apart. So a steakhouse is my appositive, and that's at the end of the sentence. Let me do one more here. My sister, the one standing on the chair, is trying to get your attention. So when I looked at this, I realized that my sister is I'm clarifying which one is my sister. She's the one standing on the chair. So I'm going to make sure I put a comma before and after it. Before and after the appositive. Because it's telling me my sister. Who is my sister? She's the one standing on the chairs. So what you're going to do today is you're going to be practicing identifying the appositive, underlining it, and setting it apart with commas as needed, okay? So this should feel pretty familiar. This shouldn't be super brand new, but I know sometimes it can be easy to forget the terminology for it. So we're going to do a little bit of practice. Now I showed you. Now it's your turn. So I would love to have 3 brave volunteers who are willing to come up and show us how it's done. We get 3 volunteers, please. Josh, great. Michelle, great. One more. Mahalia, great. Perfect. Come on up. So what I want you 3 to do is to go through, underline where you think the appositive is, and put the correct punctuation. I'm definitely going to give them merits for stepping up and being examples for us. You can select the shirt. Snaps for our brave volunteers. Okay, so let's take a look at them. The first one. Benji, can you read the first sentence for us?
My professor who eats lunch every day, and was not available for discussion.
Good. Promptly at noon was not available for discussion. Okay. Josh, I heard you say that you might change something. What would you change?
Where the commas are at.
What would you do differently?
It says a professor will use lunch every day, and then start the comma after day, and then probably at noon, and then end the day.
So you would put a comma here, right? Okay. So I agree with you on this change, but I want us to think a little bit about what is it clarifying about your professor? Your professor does what? Go over.
Eats lunch properly at noon every day.
He eats lunch every day?
No, properly at noon.
Promptly at noon, good. So I would just move it back a little bit further. Now, Josh, I can see how somebody would end it there because it seems like, oh, he eats lunch every day. That is the most common trick that students run into on the ACT, is they'll be like, oh, I see the appositive, and they're really good at finding where it starts. And they ended in a place that logically could make sense, but sometimes you have to remember the appositive and make sure you get all the way to where it ends. Okay, common mistake, understandable mistake, but make sure on the ACT in the interim when you're looking at them, ask yourself, hold on, is this the whole phrase or do I need to keep going? Okay, good. The second one, Eric, will you read the second sentence for us?
The dog, going to the floor, the one in an hour, finally got tired of paper.
Fantastic, looks good to me, nice work, nice work. And Valerie, will you read the third sentence?
The experiment refers to this kind.
Yielded, good. Yielded significant results, nice work. So it's telling us that about the experiment. It's saying it's the first of its kind. Okay? Feeling okay? Well, let's find out how you're feeling. So what I want us to do is I want us to spend some time practicing with the little handout in front of you, or little exit ticket. So what I'm gonna do is I want you to go through, underline the appositive, and put the correct commas as needed. Okay? So I'm gonna, let's take, there's 5 questions, so why don't we do 4 minutes, and if we need to add more time, we can do so. And yes, we're gonna go over them together. Apologize if the words are a little bit light. I didn't realize I had it in gray. When you get to number 2, you might think about the question up here that Josh answered. You might find something similar. So make sure you don't catch, or make sure you don't make the same conclusion. That's your so if you focus on underlining first, then you put the commas. Thanks so much. So what does it say? Very good. So underline with the description is where you see the positive. So the intent is what? one more minute. Good. Okay, so now let me ask you this. So the inset, is that part of the description? Underline that too. The inset. So now put your commas. Good. That's exactly. Oh, okay. So this one, you're very close, but remember how Josh did it a little bit earlier? You're doing something and you're a little early. So is it just a large cockroach? Okay. So what might help is go to start underlining the commas. Okay. So find the description. Just that one is necessary because when you have two adjectives against each other, remember that there can be commas within commas. All right, let me get everybody's attention back with me in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. Let's go over them together, but by together I mean I want you to talk. I want you to pick one. Any one of those, maybe the one that you felt was more challenging, that you were maybe a little bit more stuck on, the one that you were like not totally sure about. And I want you to discuss that with 1 or 2 people around you and see if you can come to the same conclusion and make sure you understand it fully, okay? So let's take 1 minute, talk to somebody about one of the questions on your paper.
And then I'm just kind of tripping out because like Brittany had it like after like the insect is a large comma and she had the
This
first
is describing the insect. This is a large comma. And then it's like how about
Before large, right?
Yes, sir. I felt like the third one was kind of challenging. I thought about it.
Yeah, so that's one of those that has commas within commas, right? So it's a given a positive. So don't let that fool you. Just ask yourself, where does the description end, right? Where does your positive end? Any commas in there can stay there. Jeanette, sure.
Jeanette, best, and then it says without fingers. And I found the longer one.
Yes. Now you know we don't have any mistake. That's good. All right, 10 seconds. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Very good. I overheard some really good commentary. Josh, can you share with me what you shared about number 3? I think the one with Jeanette or Jeanette. However you pronounce it.
That's the biggest, that's the area in the house is a collection of overdue libraries, very clean, computer, old mail, hot hair, and empty potato chip bag.
Good. What did you say was kind of throwing you off for a second?
You know, front of the office, like, I thought it was at the bottom because it had a whole bunch of comments.
Yeah, there were a whole bunch of commas, but then you figured out where the
And I
correct
looked up
one
and
is.
then it said, this area.
Fantastic, because it's describing where.
Her room.
Yes, not her room, her desk. Good, good, good. Yes. And then Josh, since I already have you on the spot here, can you tell me what you were thinking for number 2? Like, you don't have to explain what you underlined, but just tell me what you said about it.
Like, I was reading over it and I thought I ended in hairy legs cockroach and then I thought it would end there, but then I read more and it was more to long.
Excellent, beautiful. Thank you, Josh. Very nice. Okay, so here's the last thing I want to go over with you. I'm going to give you a sneak preview. I told you this year we're looking at commas. However, I'm going to show you something really easy. I want you to go back to your questions, and I want you to go back and replace the commas with dashes. When I say dashes, I mean just that, you know that line? Go back and replace the commas with dashes. Do it now. You don't have to erase it if you want to just draw it or write it over it or next to it or whatever. What you did with commas is 100% correct. And also using dashes is also correct. If you wonder how dashes are used, you just figured out how they're used. Again, this is something that you're going to explore more in depth in 10th grade, but I want to give you a sneak preview so that when your teacher tells you, we're going to teach you dashes, you're like, wait a minute, I've seen this before. Okay? And so that is how parenthetical elements work. It's something you can put in between commas, dashes, or even parentheses technically, and it works. As long as you're consistent. Now here's what I want you to be careful of. You don't want to do the thing where you have a dash on one side and a comma on the other, or a comma on one side and a dash. If you're doing dashes, close it out with dashes. If you're doing commas, close it with commas. Don't do a dash and a comma or a comma and a dash. Make sure you stick to the same one. Yeah.
What if the sentence has a comma inside?
You can have commas inside dashes as well. Yeah, just like you can have commas within commas. Okay. All right. Nice work, folks. Can you pass up your papers? You're good.